cries still echo in the streets of Tehran. 2 years later, the voices may have fallen silent, but the revolt simmers in other forms. September 2022, thousands of people protest the death of Mahsa Amini. Just days earlier, the morality police arrested the 22-year-old student. Her crime? Not wearing her headscarf correctly. According to authorities, Mahsa's brutal death was linked to a brain disease, a claim that ignites public anger. A fierce and systemic repression follows. Like Mahsa Amini, Rohene is Kurdish. She was born 27 years ago in the northwest of Iran. When she learned about Mahsa's death, she decided to stop wearing the veil as a sign of protest.
At that moment, the only thing I was thinking about was that they were going to arrest me. I knew they would send me to prison, but I had to do something that would leave a mark.
That day, along with a friend, she wrote Mahsa Amini's name on a sign.
We tied it around our necks so we wouldn't have to carry anything. We started to walk and we were stressed. Some people told us, "Don't go, they'll kill you. They'll arrest you." Others encouraged us.
Her fears eventually came true. Rohene spent 6 months behind bars. Her determination stems from her personal history. At 22, she left her family home and got a divorce, a dishonor her father found so severe, he planned to kill her. Rohene fled and sought refuge in the capital, Tehran. According to her, Iranian teenagers today are more rebellious than ever.
Young women no longer hesitate to confront their families, who they see as stuck in tradition and Islamic culture. Like me, they want to assert themselves. And they act the same with society as a whole. They say, "I don't want to do that. I don't want to be like that."
Rohene shows us a tattoo, a tilted scale. It symbolizes her rejection of injustice and inequality. In prison, most of her fellow inmates were between 18 and 26 years old. Coming from diverse backgrounds, they didn't always share the same ideas, but they all took to the streets, fueled by the same rage.
In prison, they mostly wanted to know about our connections, to get the contacts of the leaders. They wanted to prove that we were mentally ill, that we'd protested for an irrational reason. They wanted to show that we'd been trained, manipulated, that we had undergone brainwashing. They wanted to convince us that if we protested, it was a mistake. And they wanted to show that we were on the wrong path, but that wasn't the case.
According to human rights groups, at least 20,000 people have been arrested for protesting. 500 are reported to have died, thousands of others injured. 8 have been executed. Among the protesters, many were teenage girls dreaming of a normal life. A life where they could dance or sing in public and have freedom of expression. These friends talk about their experiences. They're part of a generation expressing itself for the first time, risking punishment at the hands of the regime.
Before, I had no opinion on what was happening around me. It didn't matter to me. Or at least I thought it didn't concern me. It didn't touch me. But after everything that's happened, I realized I needed to be aware. I told myself that I have a role to play. I want to be useful and participate in this movement.
For them, social media played a decisive role. Unlike previous generations, they grew up with the internet. This window into the rest of the world fueled their desire for freedom.
The people who say there was no revolution in 2022, that's just not true. We have changed, we have made our revolution.
This past year has been full of lessons for each of them.
With everything that happened, all these events, our anger suddenly erupted, and it gave us the courage to really go for it.
Still, these young women are scared. It's impossible for them to show their faces on camera.
The strength of these women who reveal themselves in broad daylight is an example to us.
The revolt against the veil has shifted boundaries, but with new measures aimed at more harshly punishing unveiled or poorly veiled women, many fear a step backwards. Art galleries are being particularly watched. Owners facing a dilemma, having to choose between losing their business or their audience. 3 months after the protests, Orchidea Darudi decided to reopen her gallery at her own risk.
I think ultimately you just have to please the young generation. They are the consumers, they are the visitors. When you go to a cafe, any nearby cafe that you go to, it's full of people without hijab. What can you do about it? Not allow them in?
During the protests, art galleries closed as a sign of support. By reopening, Orchidea hoped it would help artists. She also wanted to create a space for exchange and dialogue. But the day she reopened, the entrance was splattered in red.
I think the most important change is that I feel like there is like an extra set of eyes on me all the time. Whatever decision we make, we think how it's going to be perceived by the people mostly.
After facing all of this, Orchidea is moved by this generation's persistence.
They're just amazing. The way they dress and the attitude that they also have. You can see it that they're not scared. And it gives me hope to think that they're going to fight for what they believe in. They're going to fight for something that maybe my generation was afraid to fight for. Maybe something that my generation thought was not possible to change.
Historically, Iranian women have resisted and worked to transform society. Over the past 10 years, they have exerted particularly strong pressure. This young woman documents their struggle. She's a photography student. In this book, images of the first Iranian women who rose up against enforcement of the veil. At the time, many defended the Islamic Revolution. Then they saw the dangers.
Yes.
After everything that's happened, I think my generation has managed to create its own image. We've tried to be courageous and gain rights that previous generations could only dream of having.
Like many Iranian women, she comes from a traditional family. Educated in a religious school, she grew up with the veil. Today, she no longer wears it.
I'm going to do it from the back.
In my experience, family or school can force you to do things. But if you don't believe in them, you will eventually reject them. And often, you will reject them violently because of anger.
To Iranian authorities, these young people are under harmful Western influence. In recent years, the gap between the regime and the youth has indeed widened. The nation's economic crisis and a political system ruled by ultra-conservatives has further enraged the younger generation. Mahboubeh is 50 years old. Also from a traditional family, she has always worn the veil. A year ago, her 2 youngest daughters decided to uncover their heads. She and her husband fully support them.
My second daughter has always asked, why, whether it's hot or cold, do I have to wear the hijab? Why don't men have to wear it? My daughters have a sense of equality. I think it's just the way they are because they're all about the same age. Besides that, they don't reject Islam. My second daughter regularly reads the Quran.
While Mahbubeh agrees to speak to us, she doesn't want her daughters to. She does allow us to film their room. Many parents pressure their daughters to wear the hijab. As a result, some secretly remove it. Mahbubeh, on the other hand, encourages her daughters to fight for their values.
The first time my youngest daughter and I went to see what was happening in the streets, I asked her, "Why are you wearing a headscarf?" She replied that she was scared. Then when we encountered the police and she told me she was nervous, I told her, "No, you mustn't be afraid. If you have a goal, you must believe in it."
Still, she's worried. Recently, her husband's car was confiscated because their daughter was traveling with him without a veil.
We are harassed, but as long as we continue to stand up and protest, I don't know, the government has decided to continue. It depends on us and what we're willing to endure. We must end this.
The new generation has to balance optimism and discouragement. But despite threats and intimidation, many will not stay silent. They have hope that women may one day decide for themselves what clothes they wear and how they lead their own lives.